Joining us for this YouTube exclusive is Brooklyn native Joey Cassata to talk to us about his upcoming comedy series, Wrestling with Joeylicious. Joey, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, how are you?
Doing great, man. Now, for anybody listening out there, can you tell us a little bit about Wrestling with Joeylicious?
Sure, it's a comedy series I'm currently developing. We're shopping it to network right now. We hope to have a deal between you and me, hopefully in the next few weeks. We have basically every WWF legend on board with the show right now. I can't name them all right now just because confidentially, but most of them have signed on board already. We filmed some quick segments that you can see online. You can see on their Facebook page and stuff, the Wrestling with Joeylicious Facebook page. And it's a show about wrestling. It's a show about, I play a character called Joeylicious, and it's about an indie wrestling organization. It's this guy that's obsessed with wrestling. He's been obsessed with wrestling his whole life. It's semi-based on my real life, and maybe we can get into that a little bit later. And throughout the show, these wrestling legends appear to me in my imagination. They're never really there. So I'm the only one throughout the course of this show that gets to see these legends. And they put me into these weird, awkward situations, hilariously awkward situations, by the way. And it's I'm not sure if you got a chance to see any of the preview clips we got
Oh,
online,
yeah.
but
They're great.
you can get a little taste of what kind of predicaments and stuff I'll be in. We like to call it, it's like a mix between Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Rocky. So if you take the wackiness of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the crazy situations that all those guys are always in, and then you put the feel-good, good-hearted slob like Rocky in that sports element, and you mix those together, that's kind of what you have with Wrestling with Joeylicious.
Awesome. Now, how long have you been working on this project? And, has it always been a dream of yours to kind of create this television show involving wrestlers?
So first, the project came about. I was on an old TV show called Z-Rock. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that at all. It
Sure,
was on
yeah.
IFC. It was on IFC from 2008 to 2010, I believe. And we had many guest stars on the show. The show was based around my former band. It was based around a hard rock band at night doing kids music during the day. And throughout the course of that show, we had so many guest stars on, mostly through the music world, like Dee Snider and Dave Navarro and Marky Ramone. And we also had Joan Rivers was one of the main stars of the show. In one of the episodes in the second season, we had Chris Jericho on the show. And in that show, in that episode, the three main stars, myself and my other two band members, we kind of played a little kid's birthday party. And the theme of that birthday party was wrestling. So in that episode, we kind of created our own personas. And Chris Jericho came on, and he played himself, and it was just anyone who wants to see it, I think it's online. It might even be on Netflix or Amazon, and you can get the DVDs and stuff. The episode was hysterical. It wound up being, I think, the highest-rated episode in both seasons. So from that, the character Joeylicious was kind of born there. I created him a long time ago, and I'll get into that a little later. But through that, after Z-Rock went off the air, basically what I did was I called a friend of mine, and he's a great comedy writer, and we started writing these episodes. And originally, we didn't have any of the old legends on board. We just had basically a show about an indie wrestler, pretty straightforward, still comedy-based, of course, very Curb Your Enthusiasm, like that self-deprecating type of guy, always in trouble, and as soon as he's about to reach the pinnacle of his success, he does something to screw everything up, and back down the hill he falls. But we filmed a little sizzle reel with my old production company, and through that, we just didn't feel like it had enough oomph to it. So then we had the idea of getting some of these legends on board. And through that, we just started cold calling some of the old legends. I think we got Jimmy Snuka on board first. Jimmy came down, filmed a little segment with us. We just wanted to film maybe 3 or 4 segments with these guys just to have our reel ready to pitch to network. And once we got Jimmy on board, it really, everything else just fell into place. Once we had one guy on tape to show other guys. Everyone just loved the concept. They loved the premise. And believe it or not, I had these guys calling me after a few weeks. Some of these guys, I guess they just passed my number along throughout the industry. And I was getting phone calls from some of these legends, which really was a dream come true for me. And they were asking me about the project and how they could be involved in it. So that's kind of where the whole thing began.
Sure.
So before that, I've been a wrestling fan my whole life. I grew up with wrestling, and I used to go to Madison Square Garden every Monday night as a kid. I think the first Garden I ever went to was the month before the Sheik won the title. Mm-hmm. So I hit right at the pinnacles. I hit that. I saw the Sheik win the title, and then the second month I was there, I saw Hogan beat the Sheik for the title.
Nice.
So yeah, it was pretty. That definitely captivated a 10-year-old kid. So through that, I was a wrestling fan my whole life growing up.
Sure. Now
And
no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, with the wide variety of cameos you have in this series, with pro wrestlers of yesterday and today, coming full circle now from being a fan, what was it like to work with some of these legendary icons on your show now?
It was very surreal. It was, these guys. Some people may have forgotten about these guys over time, especially non-wrestling fans. But these guys are superstars. They're such magnetic personalities. When you get near them, it's really captivating. When we got them on set, we didn't know, I really didn't know if they could act, if they could be funny, if they could kind of play themselves out of the box a little bit, because we really asked them to play an exaggerated version of themselves. We don't want them to just be Jimmy Snuka or Mick Foley. We want them to be exaggerated versions of these guys and really that they can poke fun of at themselves. Mm-hmm. So when we got them on set, it was very businesslike, but it was so much fun dealing with these guys. They had so many stories and quick-witted, just quickly Roddy, when we had Roddy on set. Roddy, we have, it's very loosely scripted. We have a script written and we kind of want to hit our points, but, we let these guys have fun with it because we know how great they are at improv. And Roddy was improv alone. He was the best at it because he basically took our script, threw it out the window, and went, "Here's what we're going to do." And yeah, he was just so phenomenal. Everything he did was right on point. Made every line we wrote, he made it 30 times funnier. And just having these guys on set with us, and just not to give away the plot at all, but they basically at the end of all of these little shorts that I've been doing, I get my ass kicked by one of these wrestlers. So just that alone was a little bit of a dream come true. I had Roddy put me in a sleeper, Jimmy blasted me in the head with a coconut, Tito gave me the flying forearm, Mick Foley put me in basically every one of his holes. I had Sacco, I had Cactus Jack hit me with a barbed wire bat, and it was, it was a lot of fun.
Wow,
as
great.
You can imagine.
Of course.
Now, obviously, this has got some comedic aspects to it. You said it's kind of a cross between Rocky and Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but personally to you, who were some of your comedic influences growing up that kind of helped you make this show?
That's a great question. I mean, comedy, growing up, stand-up comedy for me was always, I loved Eddie Murphy. I loved Andrew Dice Clay. I loved all of that stuff. But then as far as acting-wise, I loved movies like Animal House and, oh my God, Stripes and, stuff like that, Meatballs and, growing up in the early 80s, yeah. Even, all that stuff was just really great comedy to me. It was timeless stuff. I can go back and watch Caddyshack today, and every time I flip the channel, if Caddyshack is on, I have to stop and watch it. It's just every line and every scene is funny to me. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with this show. We don't want to just have these legends on because we know we're going to get viewership just because we have so many legends on board and even some of the new guys on board too. But we didn't want to just create a show around these legends. We wanted to create a show where obviously wrestling fans will tune in and go, "Oh my God, look who this is. Look who that is," and these crazy predicaments that we're in. But we also wanted to bring in just an audience that likes comedy. So we didn't want to say, it's hard to pitch this as a wrestling show, even though it's a wrestling world it's built around. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Eastbound and Down. You know that show?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So that show is so funny to me. But I don't think you'd say that's a baseball show. It's not based around baseball. It's a comedy. Baseball happens to be a part of the show. So
Yes.
with this, same thing with wrestling with Joeylicious. Obviously, it's based in the wrestling world, but we don't like to think of it as a wrestling comedy. I think this comedy is going to span all the different genres and really be for anyone. I think once you get hooked on it, like Curb Your Enthusiasm, like Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like one of these shows, you just fall in love with the characters, not so much the concept. So that's really what we're trying to do, capture that old feel with the Caddyshack and all these other shows where Caddyshack, yes, it's a golf movie, but it's not a golf movie. You don't have to like golf to like Caddyshack.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Same thing with wrestling with Joeylicious. That's kind of what we're trying to do with it. And I really think we hit a home run. We have the first season written out already, scripted, and knock on wood, we hope to have a deal real soon.
Great. Now, Joey, do you find it hard to produce a comedy? Because I feel it's an underappreciated art form to where everybody's like, oh, you could just go be funny, but it takes a lot more than just being funny, right? Do you find it hard on this show? Was it hard for you, at least, to produce the comedy aspect with wrestling?
It's extremely hard. I mean, obviously, certain things with wrestling are going to be funny either way. If you can take these characters and really twist them to a point where you make them ridiculous, where some of them are borderline ridiculous anyway, meaning some of the old legend characters, some of these guys are so over the top that it is ridiculous, which is great for comedy. It lends itself really well for comedy. But in a way, it's hard also because you don't want to be stereotyped into that little box. So yes, producing comedies like this, especially improv comedies, the problem with it is you don't really know until you get on set with people who do improv if they can do improv or not. So it's real hard to know how magical we're going to be on set or not be on set. You know, we have a script written, so even if a guy can't do improv or he's not just naturally funny, we have our bullet points and jokes and so on and so forth written. So if we hit those, we know we're going to be okay. But we don't want to be okay. We want to be amazing, and we leave it in the hands of some of these wrestlers and some of these other comedians we'll have on the show to do that. And I think a lot of comedy today is like that. I know It's Always Sunny is very much like that. Curb Your Enthusiasm is like that. They rely on take after take and try to find the comedy while you're producing it, rather than kind of have it written on the paper as a joke. Sometimes to me, jokes just don't work, or they don't play right in a certain situation or a certain actor or a certain performer. If you let them be free, like a guy like Roddy Piper or a guy like Mick Foley, when we had Mick on set, we had the beats written and they were good. They were really good. But when he took his part and made it his own and made it Cactus Jack and made it Dude Love, it just came to life. So it is hard in the sense that you have to make sure that the improv is great, but it's easy in the sense that if it is great, the improv, then it's magical.
Yeah.
So it's like a catch-22. You want to make sure you get the right improv guys, but have a fail-safe just in case.
Sure.
Now, you mentioned that there's some comedians that are on the show, and there's obviously wrestlers on the show. Do you find that it was almost easier for wrestlers to kind of be in front of the camera and do these stuff because they're already in the entertainment business?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, like I said before, these guys are superstars. These guys have been in front of the camera their whole lives. And unlike wrestling today, it wasn't scripted back then. You know, the guys today, you can see when a guy like Roman Reigns,
Oh yeah.
No offense, when he does his shtick, you could see it's a shtick written for him. It's not flowing natural. But when you see a guy like Roddy Piper on Piper's Pit, hitting, yelling at Frank, what's his name? I remember the guy's name. The guy that was from Ohio, but he was really, really like a Mexican wrestler.
Frankie Williams.
Frankie Williams, there he is. When Piper and him, when he was going back and forth with him, that improv you could have never written for Roddy Piper, ever. You can't write that. That's Roddy Piper. That's how great he was in front of a camera. even some of the stuff with Snuka when he was bantering Snuka back and forth, or even I think in when he filmed They Live, his line, I'm here to chew bubble gum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubble gum. From what I know and from what Roddy told me personally, that was improv.
Huh.
You can't write that magic. So these guys are so great. When you say action, you never know what's going to come out of their mouth, and that's what we want. We want stuff like that. Where most stand-up comedians are real good at it too, because obviously they, on Z-Rock we had Joan Rivers, we had Gilbert Gottfried, we had a lot of these great the late Patrice O'Neill. These guys were all great at quick improv also, because they're stand-up comedians and they're used to, feeding back off an audience. Much like wrestlers, when wrestlers have to perform, they're live most of the time. Those interviews, they didn't do 30, 40 takes or something. They had to do it live, or if they were in an arena doing it live, they had to be on all the time. So they're used to doing that. So we want to, just because these guys can't wrestle anymore because they're older, doesn't mean that they're not superstars anymore. There's still magic in these guys. They just can't, do flips off the top rope anymore. Who cares?
Sure. Now, Joey, is there any one piece of advice maybe for anybody wanting to get into comedy or write comedy that you could give them that you learned maybe from doing this series?
I mean, for me, you got to do something you're familiar with. I couldn't play a nuclear physicist. I can play a wrestler from Brooklyn. I can play, I can write a wrestler from Brooklyn. I can write stuff like that. I can't write out of my comfort zone. I know comedy how I know it. I know the comedies I grew up with. I know the categories that I'm familiar with in life in general. So I can write in my comfort zone. I'm very familiar with the world that I know. I grew up in New York. I lived in Manhattan for a little while. I grew up in Brooklyn. So I know that world like the back of my hand. It's very hard for me to write a comedy based in Kentucky. I can't familiarize myself with that world.
Sure, yeah.
So I would say anyone trying to write something, don't take yourself out of the world that you know. Write what you know. Sylvester Stallone understood the streets of Philadelphia. He understood how to write that when he wrote Rocky. People have to write what they know, what their comfort zone is. Some people's comfort zone is a lot wider than other people. Mine is what it is. So wrestling, I know like the back of my hand. Trivia, anything you want to know about wrestling, I pretty much know. I still watch wrestling. I still follow wrestling. So I know that genre in and out, whether it's in the locker room, behind the scenes. I think I know what the wrestling fan is looking for. So I can write the comedy that I love based around that world. And I think that's the best advice I can give anyone trying to get into anything, whether it's comedy, drama, anything you're trying to do in life. Do something that you know really well, and then kill it. Don't try to spread yourself too thin.
Absolutely. Now, one of our biggest questions is you kind of mentioned that this was based on your life. Can you kind of get into that a little bit more, how this kind of ties in?
Sure. So when I was growing up, I was always a very big kid. And like I said, I was into wrestling from when I was 9 years old. And I used to go to the Garden every month. And I was always a really, really big kid. I think when I was 10 years old, I was about 5'10", 155, maybe something like that, 160. I was the biggest kid in class. So everyone always assumed I was going to be a wrestler. The thing that I loved more than anything. I was going to be the next Hulk Hogan. And at about 7th grade, I just stopped growing. And that's kind of what Joeylicious is based on. Joeylicious, same thing. He grew up. He was going to be a wrestler. The pilot opens up with me at Madison Square Garden watching Hogan win the title. That's kind of the day Joeylicious, the character, was born. And from that point, I knew I was going to be a wrestler. But then the big niche, the big fork in the tire was I stopped growing. But unfortunately, I didn't give up on my dream in the show Wrestling with Joeylicious. So now, fast forward 30 years later, I'm a 40-year-old guy, still want to be a wrestler more than anything in the world. I still am pursuing it. I only work maybe once a week. I wrestle one match a week. I can't get work. I'm 40. I never made it big, so I never did anything like I was going to do. With my real life, it kind of, when I stopped growing, that dream I pretty much gave up on. So I didn't pursue it. But Joeylicious kind of branches off into this alternate reality that, what if I really did stick with the wrestling thing and I went the wrestling route? What would have happened? And that's kind of what that world is.
All right, awesome. Now, Joey, this is all about wrestling. So, what are your thoughts on comedy today in pro wrestling? Is there not enough, or is there just the right amount? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I'm always a big fan of comedy in wrestling. I'm a big, with today, I love Bo Dallas. I think Bo Dallas is great. I think not only is he really talented in the ring, he's funny. He's got a lot of charisma about him. I think comedy and just overall charisma has a lot to do with everything. I mean, if you look at some of the biggest actors in Hollywood, they always say comedy is the hardest thing to do. A guy like Tom Hanks started in comedy. Robin Williams, comedic talent. But both of those guys are amazing dramatic actors. Because I think if you could do comedy, you can do all that other stuff. Comedy is, if you can make people laugh, that's the hardest thing in the world. Everything else comes easy after that. So I think with today's day and age, I think stuff like The New Day is great. I think it's great. It's funny. And these guys can also be so much more than just comedy. But comedy works for them right now. But in the future, you can't be, the only thing with wrestling, I don't think you could be a comedy act for a long, long time, because it kind of, I think it starts to die down. Like Damian Sandow, I think he lost a little bit after a while when they just started to play the same old thing after a while. You got to kind of grow as the comedy grows, or grow out of the comedy, and then you can go back into the comedy. Much like DX. I think DX was really great at first. They had a lot of comedy stuff in all their skits with China and stuff like that. And then they got really serious. And then, fast forward 10, 15 years later, when Shawn Michaels and Triple H got back together, everything you saw with them was comedy again. I think you can just fall back into that comedy. You just shouldn't overplay it or make it overstay its welcome, I think I should say, is even a better way to put it. So I think there's a fine line in wrestling. Comedy is great, but don't let it overstay its welcome. Be the comedy guy. Make sure you get over as that comedy guy. But right as you're at your peak as that comedy guy, you got to kind of switch, I think, and become serious or do something that makes you a serious wrestler. And that way you can always fall back on the comedy. That's what I would do with Bo Dallas right now. I think Bo Dallas is great. I think what do you have, a rap battle the other night on Raw, I think, right?
Yep.
You guys see that?
Yeah.
It was great. I think, play out this little faction that they're doing, but don't overplay it. Don't make them into a comedy sideshow. Make them a comedy group, but then make them do something. Make them jump someone or really injure someone, and make it be serious for a minute, so that you show them that there is another side to these guys. So I think that it's just a fine line in wrestling. I think fans love comedy, but you don't want to give them too much.
Exactly. Now, you obviously said that you've got to work with some of the greatest wrestling legends of all time, some awesome comedians. Is there anybody specifically that you haven't gotten to work with yet that you would like to have on Wrestling with Joeylicious?
Well, we have a lot of guys signed up at this point. A lot of big legends. I don't like to say everyone's name just because contractually we haven't actually worked with them yet. We have stuff signed and stuff ready to go, but just between you and I, it's some of, if not the biggest legends in wrestling that I know of.
Okay.
Some of the newer guys I would love to work with also. Obviously, The Rock is a major talent. He might be hard to get. He's a major movie star. So, but guys like that, guys like Stone Cold, some of the newer guys, I think would be great talents to work with. Me growing up in the 80s, the guys that I'm working with and the guys that I have signed on to the show right now are the guys that I've always wanted to work with. Everyone that I've reached out to and they said yes are the guys that I dreamt about working with. I even had a conversation with Warrior right before he passed. And we had a lot of emails back and forth with each other that he was super interested in the project, loved the idea. And we were in the preliminary discussions about getting him on board. And then obviously, that all happened with him. But stuff, even obviously Macho Man would have been maybe my ultimate get. If I would have had one guy I would have loved to work with, would have been Macho. I think Macho, something about Macho's charisma is, in a comedy series, I think would have just been electric.
Sure.
Well, you obviously know if you're looking for two guys who do a podcast that, all you have to do is pick up the phone. We'll be there.
Absolutely, guys. Yeah, you guys do great. I've been actually listening to your show a little bit. I listen to a lot of wrestling podcasts, and I just started getting into yours. Good stuff, man. A lot of fun.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And now, Joey, is your ultimate goal to get Wrestling with Joeylicious on a TV station? Because, it is 2016, because now, or would you settle for perhaps, a streaming service such as maybe Netflix or Hulu, or maybe the ultimate goal of being on the WWE Network one day?
Well, absolutely. Obviously, 2016, everything is going the streaming route. We're going towards network first, just because budgets right now for network series are greater than some of the ones
Sure.
you mentioned. Stuff like Netflix and Hulu maybe can rival a network series, but some of the other, even a WWE network, doesn't have some of the money I think some of these other networks that we're looking at right now. Just because a show, to do it the right way, we'd love to do it full out. It costs a lot of money, unfortunately, and we'd love to have it on network just for budget reasons alone. Of course, I'm absolutely up for streaming networks. I think Netflix is phenomenal. I think some of the original stuff they're doing on Netflix is great. Of course, WWE Network is going to be one of our stops if a network doesn't bite on this show. We have some small bites already. We're just kind of figuring out budgets and stuff like that. But WWE Network, of course, would be one of the ultimate homes for this show, I think. I think we could even use a lot of their old back catalog and their footage and incorporate it into our programming and really make it a great, great show by using some of their footage. But so, of course, WWE Network, if anyone from them is listening, we will be there. We're stopping by, and we will be talking to you shortly about Wrestling with Joeylicious. So be prepared, Mark Carano, whoever's going to be the guy listening to our pitch. But we will be there either way, because WWE Network, if the timing and the money and the push behind it is right, of course, would be one of our ultimate goals.
Now, in the spirit of Wrestling with Joeylicious, if you could you give us maybe an old school style promo on why no one should pass up the opportunity to see Wrestling with Joeylicious?
Whew, that's put me on the spot. Let me see. Old school style promo. Well, the Joeylicious character really doesn't do promos like that. He's more of a schlub. Like I said, he never really did anything the right way. So maybe I'll do an old school promo the wrong way. So yeah, if you guys are into wrestling and you want to see some of the greatest wrestling legends of all time beat up the biggest loser in town, Joeylicious, you should follow Wrestling with Joeylicious on Facebook and check out all the preview clips and follow up all the updates, and all the information you'll need is right there. Just check back every week. We'll have a new update for you on where to watch Wrestling with Joeylicious.
Wow, Joey Cassata, everybody. Joey, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we wish you nothing but the best with Wrestling with Joeylicious, and nothing but success for you in the future.
Thanks so much, guys. It was a pleasure. A lot of fun. Keep up the good work.